Good to see you, Dr. Carson.
Well, I want to start off with a question that is tailor-made for you, Dr. Carson, and that is, this is the Faith and Family Forum, and the first part of that is faith, and I'm just interested to know, how does your faith motivate you? How does it drive you? What is its point in your life, your purpose in your life?
Well, interestingly enough, everybody is a person of faith. It's just a matter of what they put their faith in. And my faith happens to be in God and in my Savior, Jesus Christ. And that affects the way that I deal with everybody. It affects the way I interact with the world. And I've said it before, my role model is Jesus. And you treat people the way that you want to be treated. And you're not going to be lying, you're not going to be cheating, you're not going to be doing nefarious things under the cover just because somebody can't see you. And it makes your life considerably simpler when you lead that kind of life.
I want to follow on with that question, because this is an event based around faith and family. And I mentioned this in my opening remarks. Faith has become, to some, a taboo issue in modern American politics. You know, you're not supposed to talk about it out in the public square. However, last summer, it is believed that faith and forgiveness that was shown by the families of the 9 people who were murdered at Mother Emanuel was part of the reason that South Carolina did not have many of the problems, the riots, the chaos that happened in other areas of the country. As president, what role would your faith play in breaking down the political, religious, racial, and economic divisions that divide so many Americans?
Well, I think the presidency is a tremendous opportunity to affect the whole being of the country. It's a bully pulpit in which you get to either talk about ways to divide people or ways to bring people together. You know, we are called the United States of America, not the divided states of America. And we have much more in common with each other than the things that separate us. And what has happened is we have allowed the purveyors of division to hold sway in our society. And hence, we believe that there's a war on women, and there are race wars, and there are income wars, and there are age wars, and there are religious wars, and there's a war on virtually anything that anybody can imagine, because they live by the old adage, divide and conquer. And it's really going to be up to we the people, and it helps tremendously when you have a president who recognizes that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. The enemies are those who are trying to divide us.
That's going to take us to I want to talk about the Supreme Court, because there have been a lot of landmark cases over the last several years that have really kind of changed the trajectory of our country. At some point in the answer of your question, and some people out here would like to know, you know, we have 9 justices on the Supreme Court now, and historically we've had a lot of Supreme Court justices come and go. I'm sure some people out here would like to know who you think your favorite or Supreme Court justice that you particularly like. But my question is centered around the fact that 4 of the current 9 Supreme Court justices were born in the 1930s, which means the likelihood that the next president of the United States will get to a point, possibly up to nearly half of the United States Supreme Court, is a distinct possibility. What types of individuals would you appoint, and what questions would you ask them before you nominate them, knowing that these are lifetime appointments?
Well, first of all, your point is very well taken. And I hope the American people understand the importance of this election for that particular reason. And those people who don't vote, and you know, last election cycle, 93 million people who could have voted did not vote. 25 to 30 million evangelicals who could have voted did not vote. And you probably know some of those people. Make sure you tell them that when you don't vote, you vote. but you're voting for the other side. And if we vote for the other side and they get 3 or 4 Supreme Court picks, we have just put a dagger in the heart of our children and our grandchildren. We cannot afford to do that. Now, having said that, you know, the process that we've used to select Supreme Court justices sometimes has not served us well, because we interview people and we ask them, you know, certain questions, and this is the acid test. I don't believe in that. You know, I believe in Matthew 7:20. It says, by their fruit you will know them. You go back and you look at what kind of fruit they have produced. Who have they associated with? What kind of rulings have they made in the past? That's going to tell you a lot more than any interview.
Thank you. You know, I'm not sure when jurisprudence went south at the Supreme Court level, but I'm taking a guess that maybe Earl Warren had a lot to do with it, which has given us a cafeteria plan of many bad decisions that have been handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court, some of them recently. Are there any decisions that you can think of that were had particular meaning to you as casting a shadow upon our country?
Well, the Obergefell, the gay marriage, I think that was a real problem. Because if you read the Constitution, and that's something they don't like to do in the government for some strange reason, or maybe they misinterpret it, that could be the problem, because, for instance, when they read the part in the government that says to promote the general welfare, they think that means put everybody on general welfare. But obviously that's not what it means. But you know, the gay marriage, everybody, according to our Constitution, should be treated equally and should have the same rights. But nobody gets extra rights. So nobody gets the right to redefine everything for everybody else and then make them conform to that. So right now in America, there are people of faith, who believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, and they live their lives according to that faith, who are being prosecuted. We cannot tolerate that. And it is up to the Congress to go back and rectify the situation. That's why we have separation of powers. They recognize that maybe one branch or another would get out of whack. That has happened. So the others have to go and correct it. So now they need to create legislation to protect the rights of every American to live by the faith that has, you know, chartered their life.
Thank you. Yes. And I think, you know, reading Scalia's dissent, I mean, some of those dissents that were written in response to the majority on that case, you almost were cheering for them as you read them. And as our organization tweeted out some images with some quotations, really good quotations.
Well, you know, what's also interesting is, you know, when it was decided that federal judges and Supreme Court judges should have lifetime appointments, the average age of death was 47, and now it's 80. So obviously we need to re-examine those criteria. And also, the Constitution says that Supreme Court judges serve as long as they have good behavior. It's not good behavior when you violate the Constitution. So somebody needs to go back and look at some of this stuff.
That's great. As a reaction to the Obergefell decision, a number of members of Congress, and I think every South Carolina member of Congress, with maybe the exception of a couple, have signed on to the First Amendment Defense Act, which would establish that the federal government can't discriminate against people that believe in traditional marriage, from the IRS to regulatory arms or these kind of things. I'm wondering, a First Amendment Defense Act, just in the brief way I've described it, would that be something you would be comfortable with as something to do in your first 100 days of office to push back against that bad decision?
It shouldn't be necessary, but unfortunately it is, and I would support such an endeavor because, you know, here's what we have to understand about this whole gay marriage issue. I don't have any problem whatsoever with any two adults, regardless of their sexual orientation, doing whatever they want to do in their private lives. And if they want to get a lawyer so that they can write up a contract, so that they can have visitation rights and share property, I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. What I do have a problem with is overturning what the Bible says. And this is the camel's nose under the tent. Because see, if you can negate this part of the Bible or that part of the Bible, you can negate the whole thing. And that's what the whole process is. They want to negate our faith in this country. And that's why it's important that people of faith be willing to actually stand up for what they believe in and not be worried about the PC police. We need to put them back in their place because we are the owners of this country.
And I'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but one of the most misused metaphors in all of American history is the one that is cited in the Constitution as a wall of separation between church and state, which, by the way, any students out there, you cannot find that in the United States Constitution. It does not exist in the Constitution. In fact, it was quoted out of a 1947 Supreme Court opinion. We'll talk about that later. But two other cases that dealt with, one is the town of Greece, which is prayer in the public square, and then the Hobby Lobby case, which is the ability of people who want to practice their faith in their business, and basically weave their faith into their business practices, which was obviously protected. What are your views on prayer in the public square and the ability of people in the private sector practicing their faith the way that their conscience dictates without violating?
Well, my view is live and let live. And if you want to pray and you want to manifest your faith in what you're doing, as long as it isn't hurting me, I see absolutely no reason why you shouldn't do that. Now, I realize that there are those people who will come and say, yeah, but if I see a crash scene or a cross, I'm going to have a seizure. I mean, and I would just say, why don't we get them some anti-seizure medication and let people live the way that they want to live? I mean, that was sort of the whole premise behind the establishment of this country. People were coming from places where they were being persecuted for this, that, or the other. They were being told how they were supposed to live, and they were being told what they could say and how they couldn't say anything against the king or you'd be executed. These are the things that we're trying to avoid. And, if you want to pray and that's part of your life, why should you not be able to do that? I don't see anybody saying to Muslims during Ramadan that you can't put your prayer rug down and face the sun and pray. So if they can do it, how come we can't do it?
Yeah. Your office, I can't resist sort of talking about some of the things that your office has done. The town of Greece decision, which became a Supreme Court decision, came out of a couple of decisions in South Carolina that was just defending the right to have an invocation at a city council meeting. I mean, here in Greenville, South Carolina, an atheist organization sued the school district because one of the other Christian universities in the town had offered for free their facility for a graduation ceremony, and all these students were exposed to, I don't know, a cross on the wall or something like that. So maybe they need some medication too.
Maybe they're vampires or something.
Vampires have rights too.
Those of you who were here earlier and saw the trailer for the movie, I'm not sure how many of you are here for the trailer, but that great Second Amendment movie that your friend is getting ready to come out with, that was pretty cool. I can't wait for that to come out. And the Second Amendment, once again, why are we still talking about the precise is it this militia? Okay, is it the militia? Does the Second Amendment refer to the state police?
And
does it refer to the militia?
And it clearly refers to we, the people. And, it's supposed to give the people the ability to assist the military in case we were invaded. But more importantly, so that we would have the ability to resist our own government if they ever got out of control and began to try to dominate the people. And we need to understand that there is nothing wrong with military arms in the hands of the people, or any other kind of arms in the hands of the responsible people. And in fact, it can be a tremendous deterrent to bad things. You know, after the San Bernardino massacre and what happened in Paris, the current administration's reaction is too many guns, let's restrict the guns for the people. The proper response should have been, we now are infiltrated with terror cells. The government is going to make available to all American citizens lessons on how to safely use firearms and protect themselves. That's what we should be doing.
I was thinking, back to your Second Amendment question, I believe tonight, and this is a plug for ABC News, wherever you are, I believe there's going to be an interview with the mother of one of the boys who committed the Columbine massacre. Oh, yeah, and I saw a clip of the interview with the mother, and it was heart-wrenching to see, you know, what she went through, as well as the families who lost all those folks 17 years ago. But what blew my mind was, in the wake of that, it came out that there were dozens of gun laws that were violated the first time, and so somehow passing more of the same, well, all of a sudden the criminals will not do those things. And so for me, oftentimes it's a mental health issue, a terrorism issue, but it's not a Second Amendment issue in some cases.
It really is. You know, we sometimes don't use common sense. But speaking of Columbine, you know, after that incident, I was invited to go to that school and to speak. And I was told when I got there, please don't talk about God, don't talk about Jesus, because, you know, the community's still kind of sensitive, and that's probably not the right thing to talk about. Well, I talked about God, and I talked about Jesus, and, you know, the people were absolutely thrilled, and that's exactly what they needed to hear at that time.
I've been needed some hope.
Yeah. Well, I've been criticized for saying this before, but, you know, when you have a massacre, they run God out of the public forum, they run God out of the schools, but then there is a massacre, and then the first thing that people want to do is they want to have a prayer vigil. Exactly. And, you know, I think when you run prayer and God and faith out of those forums, then, you know, evil looks for a vacuum. And so I'm not saying that it would have stopped it from happening, but certainly that is something that needs to be considered. I would like to go ahead and pivot to the next topic. I don't know how y'all feel about the Constitution, but to me, I view the Constitution as a handbook on how to govern ourselves, how the country should operate. And if you go to Chapter 1 of the Constitution under Article 1, it says, you know, Congress, these are all the powers and authorities that you have and the things that you can and cannot do. Go to Article 2, Chapter 2 of our handbook. It is President, these are all the things that you can and cannot do. These are all your rules. And then the third one, dealing with the third branch of government, is judiciary. Here are all your rules and authorities, things that you can and cannot do. And by the way, if you go back to tab 10, which is the 10th Amendment, at the back of the book, in the Bill of Rights, it says anything not listed in the Constitution goes to who? Is reserved to who?
The state.
The states. And as
or the people.
Or the people, respectively. And so, over the last 5 years, attorneys general have been forced to challenge frequent constitutional overreach in the courts. The Wall Street Journal has said that regulators in Washington are strong-arming citizens and corporate citizens alike. What vetting questions would you ask of the appointees to agencies like the EPA, the National Labor Relations Board, the Department of Justice, and other agencies that we've had to litigate against who don't understand the role of the 10th Amendment and some of the rules that should remain with the states?
Well, unfortunately, you know, I think you need not just to ask them questions, I think we need to change the entire mission of many of these regulatory agencies. You know, we have 645 federal agencies and sub-agencies. It is absolutely ridiculous. Many of them need to be eliminated, quite frankly. But for those that are still remaining, some of them need to have their mission change. So the EPA, the Bureau of Land Management, instead of them being these regulatory agencies with a big boot to put on everybody's neck, we should have them working with business, industry, academia, the ag business, to find the cleanest, most environmentally friendly ways to exploit the things that we have. And those are the kinds of people that I would appoint. And for people who are old, stodgy people who've been there for decades and they don't believe in that, I would provide them with an opportunity for alternative employment.
You know, you talked about environmental friendliness.
Yeah.
That might be a good, you talked about environmental friendliness, and we have this logo, and each one of these little stars around the palmetto tree has a different meaning. And one of the values that we have is stewardship, and stewardship of our land, and those kind of things, natural resources. I'm just wondering, when it comes to energy, what do you think about renewable sources of energy? Would you, do you think people of faith should encourage clean, alternative sources of energy like hydrogen, solar, and wind? I think USC Columbia has a hydrogen research group. What do you think about these clean energy options?
Obviously, it's an extraordinarily good idea, but I don't think that people who believe in taking advantage of our oil-rich environment, our natural gas-rich environment, should be set up as enemies of those who want to do renewable and different types of energy resources. In fact, I believe that some of the capital that is developed by developing our petroleum industries can be used for research into alternative energy sources. For instance, 70% of our society in this country is bicoastal. They live bicoastally. There's the Atlantic Ocean, there's the Pacific Ocean. We're not doing a whole lot to develop hydroelectric power, and yet look how much of it is available to us. And in America, traditionally, we have been incredibly innovative people. The thing that has stifled the innovation are all of these regulations that prevent people from doing reasonable things. So what we need to do is look at the regulations, and we need to do a cost-benefit analysis. And only if it passes that analysis should we utilize it. For instance, the Clean Power Plan. The EPA has looked at it. They said if we implement every aspect of it, it will lower the Earth's temperature by 0.05 degrees Fahrenheit in 85 years. That's the benefit. The cost, billions of dollars and millions of jobs. It makes absolutely no sense because these are regulations that are based on ideology. We're smart enough to base our regulations on evidence.
We've got to come up with some questions that'll stump him. We haven't stumped him yet.
I got one for you. I'm kidding. Just this past week, South Carolina, and I'm guilty, I'm the one that did it, but we sued the federal government again. Because a dozen or so years ago, the Department of Energy said, South Carolina, we want to send you nuclear waste. We said, we don't want nuclear waste. We said, the federal government said, take the nuclear waste. We will build a facility that will process it at the MOX plant, right there near Aiken and Barnwell at the SRS. And we'll either process it or we'll take it off your hands. And if we don't take it off your hands or process it, we're going to pay you up to $100 million a year. The date and time has come and gone, and they have not met their obligations. They have continued to send us nuclear waste, just like they shuttered Yucca Mountain and had us keep our nuclear waste. They have basically sent nuclear waste to South Carolina without living up to their end of the agreement. Secondly, President's talked about shutting down Gitmo, and South Carolina is one of 3 locations been discussed for sending terrorists. So they're wanting to send us nuclear waste and terrorists. What are your positions? Should terrorists be coming to the continental United States, like South Carolina, and how would you handle the nuclear waste issue coming to our state?
The terrorists should stay at Gitmo, and we should send the nuclear waste there too.
What?
No. I'm just kidding. No,
it's already been tweeted.
But clearly, Gitmo serves a useful purpose, and there's reasons that we shouldn't bring those kind of terrorists here, because automatically we start getting to arguments about their rights that we don't have to deal with at Gitmo. We could make Gitmo a more efficient place. There's no question about that. As far as the nuclear waste is concerned, I think we ought to do, the requisite studies. I know there's a lot going on out in Nevada, and you come out and that whole deal, people on both sides of the issue. But when you do a study, it has to be one that involves people from both sides. They have to agree upon what are the endpoints, what are they looking for, and how are they going to analyze the data. Once that's done, then you should be ready to commit one way or the other in terms of what's going to be done. And again, there's virtually none of our problems that cannot be solved if you subtract ego and politics.
Currently, 27 states are challenging the president's executive action on illegal immigration, basically regulatory amnesty. My question to you what would you do, and obviously he's losing because we've sued him on that too. What would you do to solve or address the illegal immigration problem in the United States?
Well, first of all, we do have an illegal immigration problem, and I don't believe that our federal government has addressed it at all. Now, I've been down to the border, and I've talked to the sheriffs down there, and they told me about the free flow of traffic across the border, and particularly the OTMs, other than Mexicans. They said a lot of people coming from Northern Africa and from the Middle East, and they're getting through, and they're not being screened, and this is very, very problematic. And that's our government that's not doing this. And also, there's so much drug traffic coming through there. There's a heroin epidemic in our country right now. You can buy a pack of heroin for less than you can buy a pack of cigarettes. It's killing us. And then you got all this marijuana coming through, and some people say, nothing wrong with marijuana, we should make it legal. Well, I can tell you as a neuroscientist, several studies have been done that show that regular exposure of cannabis to a developing brain is detrimental, and the brain continues to develop until you're in your late 20s. It can lower your IQ. We already have enough people with low IQs. We don't need to be importing more of them.
They're in Congress, right?
But in fact, we can secure those borders. Yuma County in Arizona, it's one of the 9 sectors. They put up a layered fence with an asphalt road in between for quick access. They put border guards on the border, imagine that. And then they actually prosecuted first-time offenders rather than catch and release. They stopped the illegal traffic by 97%. If you were to do that in all 9 sectors, and you put in motion detectors and drones for early warning, I think you get pretty close to 100%. And they say, well, they'll dig underneath. No, they won't, because we have radar equipment which will demonstrate whether they're digging underneath. So we can stop that. We need to pay more attention to the Atlantic and Pacific borders and the Canadian border now that Trudeau is bringing in Syrians there, because, of course, they will be infiltrated with terrorists. But in addition to that, you have to shut off the goodies. If there are no goodies, people won't have a reason to come here. And, E-Verify has to be in place, and we have to get rid of all the loopholes that allow people to get things when they come here, when they're here illegally. Now, that leaves 11.5 million plus people here illegally. What do we do with them? I think what we have to do is give them a 6-month period in which they can get registered if they have a clean, acceptable record. If they don't, they're out of here. But if they have a clean, acceptable record and they want to work as guest workers in sectors where we need guest workers, they would have to register every year. They have to pay a back tax penalty. They have to pay taxes going forward. They do not become American citizens. They do not vote. And if they want to become American citizen, they have to go through the same thing that any other person would have to go through to become an American citizen. I think that takes care of the problem very effectively.
Thank you. Oran is about to ask you some questions that are near and dear to my heart, but before he does, South Carolina is very pro-law enforcement. We're pro-first responder, pro-veteran, military, big military state. As a veteran myself, this is something that's important to me, and I work with law enforcement on the front lines. So I'm going to get a little Socratic here. If you have either served as a law enforcement officer, first responder, or a member of the military, or you're currently doing so, or you're related to somebody who's doing so, would you raise your hand or clap? Go ahead and clap. Okay, that's so. You know, now we know our audience.
Yeah. I have the sense that maybe those who are in the line of fire literally every day that wear the uniform, I don't sense that they're respected as they should be. What can you do as president to restore the respect for our military and our law enforcement?
Well, first of all, we need to recognize as a nation, since our inception, we've been involved in some kind of conflict approximately every 15 to 20 years. And we would not be a free nation without our military and without our veterans, so we really should honor them. There's no question about that. And I think honoring and respecting them is treating them the right way. When people volunteer and are enlisted in our military, they should have an external support system that is with them throughout their entire military career and for 3 to 5 years after they're out. A year before they're out, they need to be working on how to reintegrate them into society so that they quit the military on Friday and they start their new job on Monday. They need to have health empowerment accounts, which is like a health savings account minus the bureaucrats, which allow them to go to any healthcare facility in the country where we should be honored to take care of them. If they want to go to a VA facility, they should be able to go to a VA facility. But I think we should also utilize the VA facilities for research into post-traumatic stress disorder, for traumatic brain injuries, for limb replacement, for the kinds of things that are relevant to them. And as far as our police officers are concerned, respect is what we're talking about. The people need to respect the police, the people need to respect the police, and the police need to respect the people. And one of the ways that we can do that is with familiarity. I believe that it would be a very wise thing to put policemen into the communities, the same policemen, so that people get to know them, so that little Johnny's first encounter with the policeman is somebody playing kickball with him as opposed to somebody chasing him down the alley. When people know each other, it makes all the difference in the world.
Thank you for that. We have used as a phrase for our work as an organization, that's Palmetto Family, of defending and strengthening families. And the defending is a little easier. We work with elected officials and we work with attorneys who specialize in religious freedom. But the strengthening families is the harder part. How do we actually strengthen the relationships between parents and children, strengthen fatherhood and motherhood? There's got to be a way for us to do that in the nation, and the president has that platform to be able to do that. Have you got any ideas for me? How can a president do that kind of thing? How can a governor?
I do have some ideas about that. You know, some of the policies that we have put forth as a nation actually break families down. We reward people for having broken families, but when they have a whole family, we take the money from them, even though they're struggling together, trying to, strengthen their family and raise their children. Those kinds of policies, I think, need to be re-examined and looked at. All of our policies should be aimed at creating strong families, because that is the basic unit for a strong nation. And those who have tried to destroy us in the past, you look at somebody like Joseph Stalin, and he said, if you want to destroy America, you need to undermine 3 things: their spiritual life, their patriotism, and their morality. Are those the things that are under attack in our country? One of the other Russian leaders said their faith and their family. And there is no question that we need to recognize that. There's plenty of evidence that a child who is raised in a strong nuclear family with a father who is male and a mother who is female, who has traditional values, does much better than any other form. Now, it's not saying that there's anything wrong necessarily with any other form, because I grew up, without a father, and I had a strong mother. But the point is, they try to say that everything is equal. By saying that everything is equal, then, there's nothing that is worth pursuing to a greater degree than anything else. And it's the very same thing that the Roman Empire did. Their long flowing robes, and they were eloquent speakers, and nothing was right and nothing was wrong. And they lost their vision. And the Bible says in Proverbs 29:18, without a vision, the people perish. Well, that's exactly what's happening to us. We need to define who we are. We can't let the secular progressives rob us of our identity, and our family is a very strong part of our identity.
A few moments ago, Oran asked you about the environment and stewardship of the environment. And of course, I've dealt with this because I have a federal agency that oftentimes, when the administration or the federal government can't pass a law regulating the environment through the people as elected representatives in Congress, they try to do an end run around and do it through regulatory fiat. Waters of the U.S., redefinition by bureaucrats, where they could basically land grab your property because a ditch running through your property might fill up with water occasionally throughout the year. That's now like the Mississippi River, something that they can regulate. Or the Clean Power Plan, which we just, again, another lawsuit, another win temporarily. How would you direct your EPA as President of the United States? How would you direct those appointees to balance the need to protect a livable environment, because we want to be protective of our environment, with the reality of the cost of regulations on businesses and families through utility cost?
Well, first of all, I would educate them. I would help all of these regulators to understand that every single federal regulation costs money in terms of goods and services. It's a tax, and it's the most regressive form of taxation that there is, because everybody has to pay the same thing. So when you go into the store and you buy a box of detergent and it's gone up 50 cents because of regulations, who's hurt by that? Poor people. Rich people don't even notice it. Middle-class people may not notice it till they get to the cash register, and everything has gone up a bit, and they just don't feel that they have the same buying power. So I would educate all of those regulators in terms of what they are doing to the people of the United States. And also, these things are driving up our costs and our debts. So a combination of driving up the regulations and driving up the debt is destroying the middle class and the poor people. Because what happens when we have such high debt? Well, you're not able to go to the bank and put 5% of your check in there every Friday and watch it grow over the next few decades so that you can retire. That part of the American dream has disappeared. They are destroying the American dream for everybody. And of course, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton will come along and say, it's those evil rich people, and that's what's causing you your problem. No, it's not the evil rich people, it's the evil government, and we need to get them under control.
I'm looking up into the booth now. I think we're ready for that video. This video is going to look very familiar to you. I'm not sure which monitor you can see, but the Center for Medical Progress had a series of videos, and this is one of them, and I want you to just watch it and kind of react.
We've been very good at getting cars on the lower because we know that, so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see if I can get it intact. A lot of people want intact parts these days because they're looking for specific notes, AV notes, SA. I was like, wow, I didn't even know. Good for them. Yesterday was the first time she said people wanted lungs. And then, like I said, always as many intact livers as possible. Yeah, that would definitely get people to say, I'll do the same for the same price, and I'll do that.
I mean, it's disgusting. And, we have the nerve to call some ancient societies heathen. I mean, how can God bless a society that has no regard for human life and that is selling baby parts? I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Dr. Carson, we are at the end of our forum with you, but I would like to give you 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, to basically talk to the citizens of our great state who will be going to the polls here in a couple of days.
And you can sit or you can step out there,
the
whatever's
stage is
comfortable.
yours. And while he's walking around, ladies and gentlemen, there's one thing he hasn't bragged about. When he was here a couple of weeks ago, I did a forum with Dr. Carson, and it was on my wife's birthday. And he can sing because my wife walked into the room and he led the room in happy birthday to my wife. You got some good pipes on you, Dr. Carson. The stage is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to say that, this has been an incredible journey running for president. It wasn't something that I particularly wanted to do, but I listened to my fellow citizens, hundreds of thousands of petitions asking me to do it, as a member of we the people, not a member of we the political class, and certainly not a member of we the media and the people who try to control us and tell us what we're supposed to think. And I will continue to seek the wisdom of God because I believe that he still loves this nation and that he's willing to save this nation. But I believe that we the people will be the ones who will make that determination. Not they, the media, and not they, the pundits, and not they, the political class. If we continue to listen to them, we will continue to go down the same path. All they do is they change it a little bit, they tweak it a little bit, but the fact of the matter is they're all connected with all the special interest groups and the billionaires. It's one of the reasons that I absolutely refuse to take money from special interest groups and billionaires who want to influence the process, because it is corrupting everything. And as I've looked under the hood of what runs this nation, your first impression is to close it and run away. But the fact of the matter is, I have to think about those who are coming after us. I have to think about our children. This is the first generation expected to do worse than their parents, and it's going to be the same with the generation after that, and every generation going forward. And they say it's the new normal. There is nothing normal about this, and there's no way we should accept it. Thank you very much.